Right from the get-go, the right-wing press was out to demonise and scapegoat the gay community for this terrible new disease.
There is now a danger that has become a threat to us all.
The rapidly deepening public alarm over the killer disease, AIDS.
All homosexual practice is an abomination and a perversion.
They were blaming it on gay men. This was a gay disease, it was a gay plague. It was just extraordinary.
Children who need to be taught to respect traditional moral values are being taught that they have an inalienable right to be gay.
The Princess of Wales felt not the slightest apprehension about her visit to the Middlesex Hospital and its AIDS ward. All the speculation had centred on whether she would wear gloves when shaking hands with the staff and patients on the new ward.
Princess Diana was incredibly, incredibly important for pushing it sort of, onto the world stage.
When people in government didn't speak out,
Government can't stop you from getting AIDS.
Princess Diana did. She made a difference.
HIV does not make people dangerous to know, so you can shake their hands and give them a hug. Heaven knows they need it.
There was nobody else around at that time that could have done the same job that she did.
It's a tremendous change for someone, if I may say, of 19 to make all of a sudden, the transition.
It is, but I've had a small run up to it all in the last 6 months. And next to British Charles and I can't go wrong. He's there with me.
The arrival of Diana Spencer into the royal family in 1981 marked the beginning of a new era. She brought with her an extraordinary warmth and compassion that touched the hearts of millions.
To say that a part of the British public adored Diana is an understatement. I don't quite know what it was about her. She was undoubtedly beautiful. She was intelligent, she was funny, and there was always a sense that she had a huge heart.
I mean, Princess Diana was extraordinary, I mean, sort of no other member of the royal family would, dream of being sort of involved.
It was a very exciting period for me. It was Leicester Square, Piccadilly Circus every night of the week after I finished work and going home through Soho. It just seemed to me, the centre of the universe. And I still, to this day, get a buzz walking through that area. I can't be in London and not retrace some steps through the back streets of Soho. The very beginnings of the very first mega nightclubs like Bangs and Busby's, and Heaven Came Later, of course, but that was the first time that you saw 1,000 people on a dance floor, where previously, if you saw 5 people in a bar in Wales, that was a good night out. I think by the time I was 30, there wasn't a nightclub in London or theatre I couldn't go in on a VIP pass and a ticket. It was just, you did get to know everybody.
I must tell you that what we've got is an attempt to substitute the rule of the mob for the rule of law. And it must not succeed.
That was a really exciting period. The very first gay pride march had taken place at that point. There was a real sense that we, you know, if we stuck together, we could make progress. So at that point in time, it was pure sunshine. Everything was roses, and we had our lives in front of us. Long before HIV/AIDS came along, I thought, if everything came along, you know, it would take us out. Because everybody's sleeping with everybody at the moment, and they were, and it's like, you know, that was fabulous. But those freedoms come at a price, unfortunately.
A mystery disease known as the gay plague has become an epidemic unprecedented in the history of American medicine.
In 1981, a new unknown illness started to spread across the United States. Doctors had discovered clusters of pneumonia in previously healthy homosexual men in Los Angeles, New York, and San Francisco. The US Center for Disease Control began to investigate.
The first known cases of what later became AIDS were reported in the United States in 1981, and they affected gay and bisexual men, which led to propositions that the disease was somehow related to homosexuality. Of course it wasn't, but in those early days, we didn't know what was causing this terrible illness, we didn't know how it was spread, so people as a fallback tended to scapegoat and blame the gay community.
Reverend Falwell, you've called for the closing of bathhouses and other measures, and you say you're calling for these measures to protect the health of the nation. But at the same time, you say AIDS is God's judgment on homosexual promiscuity.
Homosexual bathhouses, which everyone knows are just for the most dirty, vulgar, filthy, bloody occurrences, anal intercourse, and worse, then he should agree with me. They should be shut down, because that is where, according to what little information we have, there's the transmission of the disease.
News of the American disease hit headlines in the UK. This introduced a wave of fear that permeated the gay community. It wasn't long until the illness made its way to British shores.
In the early days here in Britain, the perception was that HIV/AIDS was an American disease. It had begun in America, the first cases were identified there. As a result, a lot of people said, to be safe, don't have sex with Americans. But of course that was a completely false and misleading advice, because it wasn't Americans who caused AIDS, it was particular sexual practices and the sharing of blood. At first, there were fears that this was some kind of right-wing plot to roll back the LGBT+ community. This was a scare story to try and discourage gay people from having sex. But very quickly, it became clear that regardless of the cause, our community was in danger, and that we had to take steps to do something to try and prevent its spread.
All gay people must unite to overcome discrimination against people with AIDS. If we do not, we will all suffer. We will all be defeated. We will all truly be victims of AIDS.
I was diagnosed with a virus in October 1982. Every single kind of lymph node in my body seemed to kind of erupt. Well, in those days, I used to go to James Pringle House, which was the sexual health clinic of the Middlesex Hospital. So I presented myself there, and they were all over me. On the second day, they came in and they told me that this persistent lymphadenopathy, which is what I had, was caused by a virus which had no name. There was no cure. This was a terminal diagnosis. I was 33 and I had between 3 and 9 months to live. And I was gutted. And I remember going back to my flat in the East End and closing the door and just collapsing. And I didn't get in touch with anybody. I didn't know sort of what to do. But I was beginning to get aware of what was happening. You know, I had lived in New York in 1974. I have many, many friends there. Of course, I'd been to San Francisco. And, you know, things were beginning to kind of filter across the pond, so to speak, about what was happening in San Francisco. But these are very early days, so no one quite knew what was happening, except young men were getting sick and they were dying.
I used to go dancing at the gay nightclub Heaven most Saturday nights. I'd always be there with a group of friends, the regulars who knew each other. During the AIDS pandemic, suddenly someone you knew for years didn't turn up. You never saw them again. They had AIDS and were dead. That was so devastating. Week after week, month after month, to see people you knew well suddenly disappear and die. It was heartbreaking.
A lot of boys just disappeared, and I think that could be described as them not being able to face that with the community, with their friends in London, and do. Some did, and they were incredibly brave. Some of them, they stopped coming. And you know, what happened to Alan? What happened to so-and-so? And a few months later, you get the news from Newcastle or wherever they'd gone back home that they passed. And I was kind of almost felt hurtful because, you know, why didn't they stay? You know, they would have been all right. We looked after our own. That's the one thing we did too in AIDS HIV. And I vowed that we would do that, is that nobody had to go through this thing alone. It was an awful process, because when they're so very young, what tends to happen is that their brain gone, their organs shut down, but their heart is a 20-year-old. And it's designed to go to 100 and something, and you're pumping morphine, and you know what's going to happen, and it's like that can take days sometimes. It was at that point you realise that it's just as if you're in a war. And people are dropping left, right and centre, and yet that altered reality aspect that everybody else is going on in the world on their own, that was so hard.
The Princess of Wales was a new kind of royal. She carried out her duties with elegance and style, just like other members of the royal family. But there was a difference. She wasn't stuffy, responding to people naturally, and the people took her to their hearts.
In the early 1980s, the world fell madly in love with the new wife of the future king, Diana, Princess of Wales. With every event, every photograph, every screening crowd, Princess Diana morphed from a shy young girl into a charismatic and empathetic superstar.
The square was literally overflowing with a sea of humanity, with over 6,000 people packing into every available space to see the first visit to the area by Lady Diana.
One little boy did a Jack-in-the-Box impersonation to plant a kiss on the princess's cheek.
It's just so beautiful. I'm just so privileged. I can't believe I did that.
Was she as pretty as you expected her to be?
Oh, prettier than ever. More prettier than ever.
The birth of Prince William in 1982 showcased Her Royal Highness as a hands-on parent, distinctly different from the distant royal mothers before her. She even demanded to bring 9-month-old William on the couple's first major royal tour.
The princess's popularity soon turned into adulation. A new word began to appear in the media's vocabulary, die-mania. On a trip to America, the crowds neared hysteria, screaming for the princess wherever she went.
The couple circled the arena to the kind of reception normally reserved in this age group for pop stars.
I've come to the conclusion that really it would have been far easier to have had 2 wives. And I could have walked down the middle, directing the operation.
2 years later, the couple welcomed a second son, but their fairy tale would not last.
It's only the couple's second public appearance together in over a month, but tomorrow they'll go their separate ways again. The princess stays in London. Prince Charles goes to Scotland.
Diana's refusal to fit the royal mould and quietly fulfill her duties may have endeared her to the public. But at the palace, her new kind of royal attitude was beginning to cause friction. Princess Diana became an outsider, and the people loved her for it.
Many parents rejected their gay and bisexual sons on hearing that they were diagnosed with AIDS. This was a terrible, terrible thing for these mostly very young men to suddenly have no family support and be left all alone. They felt emotionally and psychologically devastated. They felt cast out and rejected. And this was on top of dealing with a deadly virus that was going to kill them. You can imagine the trauma they were going through.
I basically didn't tell my parents. I thought I'd put them through enough coming out as gay when I was 21. But I was, again, blessed in terms that my younger brother and I and my younger brother extraordinarily got on really well. So I told him that I had this diagnosis and left it for him when the time came when I got ill, that he would be able to explain to my parents what the reality was. Because what you have to remember, as it all kicked off, so to speak, the right-wing press was just appalling. They were giving out so much misinformation. They were blaming it on gay men. This was a gay disease. It was a gay plague. I mean, it was just extraordinary.
For homosexual men, diagnoses came with a large dose of prejudice and hate. In the US, the gay community faced the wrath of religious groups who named the disease the gay plague. Soon, the British press adopted the same rhetoric. The country hounded the gay community. Britain became brutal.
Right from the get-go, the right-wing press was out to demonise and scapegoat the gay community for this terrible new disease.
It made them feel as if any conscious part of their brain that thought, well, this isn't quite right, it washed that out. They felt absolutely able to come out and be their very worst.
This toxic mix of AIDS phobia and homophobia made life very, very tough for LGBT+ people. There was a huge rise in arrests of gay and bisexual men for consenting same-sex behaviour, and there was a huge spike in queer bashing attacks, including murders of people who are LGBT+. We felt under attack. We felt like we were being treated as, quote, the enemy within.
They were just appalling. They were using it, you know, they were weaponizing it. And really, I mean, in such an unhelpful way.
All homosexual practice is an abomination and a perversion. Those engaged in it should be challenged on an individual basis to repent.
To every homophobe and anti-gay bigot in this country, the only people who will have succour and comfort from your views are those who beat up, discriminate and practice abuse against the gay community.
Right,
you ought to be ashamed of yourself as a human being.
Please don't interrupt.
I well remember the case of two gay friends of mine. They were a couple who regularly drank in their local pub. One night they went to that pub and were told by the landlord that he wouldn't serve them unless they went home and bought their own glasses. This was the scale of ignorance. People back then, many people back then, thought that you could get AIDS from drinking from the same glass as someone who had the virus. That was complete nonsense, but it was widely held and led to masses of discrimination.
Children who need to be taught to respect traditional moral values are being taught that they have an inalienable right to be gay.
She's just coming into Downing Street now. Here comes the Prime Ministerial rover, bearing now Mrs. Thatcher.
Where there is discord, may we bring harmony. Where there is error, may we bring truth. Where there is doubt, may we bring faith. And where there is despair, may we bring hope.
A fierce leader held the reins in 1980s Britain. As Prime Minister and leader of the Conservative Party, Margaret Thatcher's politics dominated the country. And from day one, she posed a very real threat to sexual liberation and gay rights. The arrival of AIDS fueled her mandate. Thatcher's government viewed the disease as a gay problem. Funding and research were not prioritised.
In 1980s Britain, the LGBT+ community felt under attack. We had a Conservative government led by Margaret Thatcher, which introduced a series of moral campaigns, the first being, quote, for family values, the second being for a return to Victorian values. And in neither case was there any place for the LGBT+ community. That is the context in which AIDS came to Britain.
I just, in the few minutes we've got left, turn to something which is being spoken of as the biggest threat that mankind has ever had to face, and that's notwithstanding nuclear weapons. I'm talking about AIDS. Is there any truth in the suggestion one hears that this government has been dragging its feet on AIDS because of your distaste for the whole subject, that you perhaps feel that being explicit in telling the public what it's all about would be somehow quite offensive?
It took so long for Thatcher's government to get involved, and we look at the timeline now and we'd be horrified.
Government can't stop you from getting AIDS, but most people could stop themselves by taking the appropriate preventive action.
When it was just gay and bisexual men who were dying from HIV, the Thatcher government did nothing. We felt abandoned and rejected by our own government. Margaret Thatcher has queer blood on her hands.
By autumn 1983, 24 cases of AIDS had been reported in Britain, including 2 males with haemophilia and a woman. This revelation changed things. AIDS could no longer be solely blamed on gay men. Over the next year, studies into the new disease took a dramatic turn. It was discovered that AIDS was caused by an underlying HIV infection. Due to the hidden nature of the infection, HIV was much more prevalent than anyone could have predicted. Thatcher found herself in the middle of a losing battle, and it was time to take action.
It was almost the mid-1980s before the government realized that this was a disease that could affect anyone, and that education programs needed to be rolled out to alert people about the dangers and to give advice about how to prevent the spread of the virus.
The moment that she heard it was heterosexual, she just released the floodgates on funding.
She finally appointed a cabinet committee to tackle the crisis in 1986. Opinions diverged dramatically. Some favoured quarantines and compulsory testing. Others preferred the promotion of condoms. To this day, the most memorable government response was the national Don't Die of Ignorance campaign, launched in 1987.
There is now a danger that has become a threat to us all. It is a deadly disease and there is no known cure. The virus can be passed during sexual intercourse with an infected person. Anyone can get it, man or woman. So far, it's been confined to small groups, but it's spreading. So protect yourself. And read this leaflet when it arrives. If you ignore AIDS, it could be the death of you. So don't die of ignorance.
Given that the government had done nothing previously, the Don't Die of Ignorance advertising campaign was progress. It had a huge impact, together with the leafleting of every household in the UK.
Health professionals are concerned that too many people still associate the disease with gay men and drug users.
They jolted people out of their complacency. But the Grim Reaper scaremongering tone also created fear and I think stirred prejudice.
The way that it was so framed, and of course it was built on, it was to make people afraid. You know, the notion of coffins and ice picks and what have you. And then, of course, the voice of John Hurt saying this is a virus, but which can affect anybody. So it's there in the text. It's there printed, you know, which can affect anybody. But it just built up so much fear that people really weren't taking it on board.
Stick to one partner. If you don't, use a condom. And for drug misusers, don't inject drugs. If you can't stop, don't share equipment.
The same year, the Conservatives started planning their biggest attack yet on gay rights.
On the back of all that having been done, they then turn around and they create Section 28. Section 28 because sort of Thatcher thinks that people are being taught that they have an inalienable right to be gay. You know, people have an inalienable right to be who they are.
Section 28 prohibited the promotion of homosexuality by local authorities. Promotion was never defined, but it led to massive self-censorship in schools, by local councils and others, because they feared they might be prosecuted. As a result, a whole generation of young LGBT+ kids in schools got no affirmation and no support.
Homosexuals have contributions to make to society which they can only make openly and unashamedly. This bill will silence that voice.
Quite frankly, your lordships, I don't actually consider that my friends, my daughters, or my own sexuality is any of your business.
This was one of the largest protests ever seen during the Stop the Claws campaign. Organisers claimed 50,000 joined the march. Police said it was nearer 20,000. At the head of the column, representatives from theatre and the arts who claim the clause could lead to censorship.
Even now, a play has been banned that was commissioned up in the north of England. It's not going to be put on because it has 4 gay characters. So there's censorship of the mind.
Clause 28 will prevent local authorities from actively promoting homosexuality. Campaigners say it's an attack on basic human rights.
We are advisors to the government in all areas of AIDS matters. We are expert in it. And it's ironic that whilst that is happening, this government, our government, should have then passed this rather mean-spirited, cruel, little savage law out from the worst of motives. And I don't understand that. And I hope eventually Section 28 will be repealed.
The gay community fought back through protests, speeches and marches, but Thatcher's government ignored their pleas.
With numbers in Britain now doubling every 8 months, specialists warn that we could have 5,000 cases in 3 years' time.
By the end of 1987, infection rates had spiralled. It was estimated that between 20,000 and 50,000 people were HIV infected. The majority would go on to develop AIDS over the next decade. At this point, public support and government funding were crucial. Princess Diana stepped up to that challenge.
The Princess of Wales felt not the slightest apprehension about her visit to the Middlesex Hospital and its AIDS ward, according to press reports. All the speculation had centred on whether she would wear gloves when shaking hands with the staff and patients on the new ward. But as she entered, to the delight of the staff, she clearly wasn't wearing gloves. And she shook hands with all the nurses, doctors and all 10 patients on the ward. She stayed more than an hour, but was not filmed with any of the patients. They were worried about public exposure. Only one agreed to be photographed.
When I saw Princess Diana shaking the hand of a person living with HIV and AIDS without wearing any gloves, first of all, I was astonished that she would dare do it. But secondly, I thought, wow, this is a game changer.
What changed overnight was the fact that it became fashionable, it became acceptable to support us.
The lead up to Princess Diana coming was, will she or won't she wear gloves? And she didn't. I mean, I believe she wouldn't, and she's lived up to what I believed. She knew the facts.
That was, I mean, an incredible signal. And then, you know, she continued. So it wasn't like, oh, just I'll do the handshake and then that's it. She was constantly there. You know, very few people know is that she used to go and visit the London Lighthouse. You know, privately, she would just go and be there with people. I mean, and that's amazing. I mean, sort of, how many people do that?
Reaffirming her commitment to the care of AIDS sufferers, the Princess of Wales visited Europe's first AIDS hospice in London's East End today. Staff at the hospice say the Princess is an inspiration. By touching and talking to patients, she reduces the prejudice, stigma and fear of AIDS.
Diana dedicated her time to breaking AIDS stigma over the following years. She opened more and more hospital wards and visited countless patients across the world.
Her contribution was immense. Diana was able to, you know, really soften the blow a little bit, make Fleet Street look at itself.
You know, when Princess Diana becomes involved, it just has this amazing ripple effect.
It was hugely significant and valuable to have someone like Princess Diana right at the top of the establishment, speaking out and publicly supporting people living with HIV and AIDS. When she hugged and shook hands without gloves, people who were in hospital with this deadly virus, it showed a level of care and compassion that no one else in the establishment has ever shown.
Later, on a closed visit to the AIDS ward, the Princess met and touched many of the children, picking up a small boy dying of AIDS and hugging him. Staff told the Princess they were surprised that she'd come to Harlem Hospital, a place never visited by any American president and few major political leaders.
In 1991, the Princess of Wales gave one of her most famous and important speeches to date.
HIV does not make people dangerous to know, so you can shake their hands and give them a hug. Heaven knows they need it. What's more, you can share their homes, their workplaces, their playgrounds, and their toys. We all need to be alert to the special needs of those for whom AIDS is the last straw in an already heavy burden of discrimination and misfortune.
Her words soothed the pain of every AIDS and HIV victim. There is no doubt that Princess Diana became a beacon of light in a period of darkness for so many.
To have the wife of the future king come to them and show them that love and compassion, that was just so moving, so powerful, so reassuring in a dark time when they had very few reassurances in their lives.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're leaving Downing Street for the last time after 11.5 wonderful years, and we're very happy that we leave the United Kingdom in a very, very much better state than when we came here 11.5 years ago.
The new decade brought change. Thatcher had resigned, and the US and UK worked hard to find new treatments for the disease. Despite facing massive media attention, harassment, and the breakdown of her marriage with the Prince of Wales, Diana continued to spearhead vital work tackling the AIDS and HIV stigma.
I see no let or hindrance why she should not divorce. And remember, Diana has always said to her friends that throughout her royal career, I will never become queen.
The uncharitable have found the AIDS issue fertile ground to air their prejudices. If their views were voiced, to help fight the disease, that would be fine. However, too often their attitudes reveal only their own narrowness of mind and a sad lack of common humanity.
The Princess revisited Middlesex Hospital in 1991 with First Lady Barbara Bush. The pair openly hugged patients and supported the vulnerable, showing a united front for the fight against AIDS.
She had that kind of kindness and generosity and care. And I suppose that maybe in some ways that she kind of understood to be an outsider, what it was like.
I think the British people need someone in public life to give affection, to make them feel important, to support them, to give them light in their dark tunnels.
Treatments and medicines started to turn a corner in 1996. The mortality rate began to decline after peaking at 1700, and AIDS was no longer deemed as an immediate death sentence.
The patients are no longer getting sick. Some patients who already were extremely ill can remain so, but the vast majority of patients no longer progress in their illness and in fact get better, feel better and go back to work.
It's not wrong to speculate about a cure and what it will take to bring about a cure. I think with triple therapy we're not there yet, but conceptually there's no reason not to think about a cure in the long term.
Treatment equals life. I mean, I've lost so many friends in the United States that were afraid to take an aspirin. You can't be afraid, you have to try things.
Princess Diana went on to help many more vulnerable groups across the world. From landmines to homelessness, Diana worked tirelessly for a myriad of progressive causes.
Especially now, as Christmas brings its own painful stresses to so many people in need. The sick, the old, the handicapped and the homeless, the lonely, the confused, and the simply unloved, who are needing your help more than ever.
However, the People's Princess never lived to see the true results of her work pay off.
Just to confirm the news that Diana, Princess of Wales, has died in a car accident in Paris, which also killed her companion, Dodi Fayed.
Her tragic death in 1997 rocked the world. A wave of grief spread far and wide. But there was one group which felt the loss acutely: the LGBTQ community. Her leadership, voice and campaigning had formed a ring of protection around AIDS and HIV victims everywhere.
We had lost an ally. I mean, you know, because there are not that many people that, you know, of her caliber that hold that kind of sort of, you know, weight. And it's just the kind of the kindness So yeah, I mean, it was really kind of, yeah, it was heartbreaking. The ramifications of it, I mean, the effect that it had sort of, and still does have, you know, on her kids, and particularly sort of Harry, reverberate. My partner was very much sort of, you know, socialist, Marxist, and not as enamoured, but even he sort of, yeah, you know, was aware that this was a tragedy, a huge tragedy.
Princess Diana embraced people living with HIV and AIDS and pushed for understanding and acceptance long before any other member in the royal family, or indeed any other member of the British establishment. She was a trailblazer, and through her trailblazing, people living with the virus felt reassured, felt comforted, felt that there was someone right at the top who cared about them.
Because it was so significant, because it was so important, because she enabled so much, I don't think we could have survived much longer the way we were. It was just so hard, and we weren't making the progress we want to. I mean, like, my biggest fear in those early, 2 years, 3 years, what the Terence Higgins Trust would just be stillborn because it couldn't maintain, the level at work, and, volunteers all couldn't well, but you need premises, you need networks, you need phones, you need, professionals.
Princess Diana was incredibly, incredibly important for pushing it sort of, onto the world stage in the same way that Elizabeth Taylor was for the Americans. I mean, sort of, the pair of them, because these are just megastars. So yeah, really, really, really important.
She was able to help us in a way that I don't think anybody else could either. There was nobody else around at that time that could have done the same job that she did. There just isn't.
Today, Princess Diana's legacy lives on through her two sons. Prince Harry and Prince William continue their mother's vital work beyond the epidemic. Prince Harry has even publicly taken HIV tests to help break common stigmas and prejudices.
No, one is fine. When my mother held the hand of a man dying of AIDS in an East London hospital, no one would have imagined that just over a quarter of a century later, treatment would exist that could see HIV-positive people live full, healthy, loving lives.
The 1980s AIDS epidemic became one of the most tumultuous times in recent history. A generation of boys fought a losing battle, and many never appeared again.
This became the forgotten epidemic. I mean, I got so angry and upset when COVID happened, and the way that COVID was being treated was that we hadn't had a pandemic since the Spanish flu. And I seem to remember that I was living through one.
You get convinced that I'm going to go old with this lot. I'm going to, you just do. And so many of them are, just not here anymore.
It took until 2003 to reverse Section 28. 15 years of censorship came out of one epidemic, and the LGBTQ community has never forgotten. Only now decades on, do we really understand the gravity of Princess Diana's work. Her fight against prejudice and the struggle to give a voice to a community terrorized by stigma and loss changed perceptions of this ruthless disease forever.
We all need to be alert to the special needs of those for whom AIDS is the last straw in an already heavy burden of discrimination and misfortune.
It was awful. I wouldn't want to go back there. Never.